Friends, welcome back to the Ascending Crows podcast. Thank you for listening. This is your host, Sam Roloski. Today's guest is Derek Polzer. Derek is an artist of many mediums, and the work that really stands out the most to me is his banjos that he makes himself. And a lot of his art is really made from stuff that he finds on his hikes and travels. And I feel like his art resonates with his path as a Quaker and his appreciation for folk culture. Big part of his path is returning back to nature and finding that place of nature within our own selves. So please sit back, enjoy the beautiful music played by his own banjos, and ascend with the crows.
Ascending Crows Podcast.
Beautiful. So these instruments you brought today, these are your creations, right?
Yeah, I've been playing banjo since high school, which was 50 years ago, and I've just I've always had an interest in the instrument. And about 10 years ago, I got involved in Civil War reenacting. And I was surprised to see that there was a music scene there, primarily music from, pre-Civil War 1860s that came out of the minstrel stage. And banjo and fiddle were a big part of it. And so I already played banjo in a couple of different traditional styles. I decided I wanted one of these instruments, and being a woodworker, I figured, well, I might as well make one. So I made my first instrument about 10 years ago. And it's been, I've been going ever since. I made a whole bunch of them since.
Wow. It's hard to believe that out of your, interest in this, that it's just that recent. You said 10 years ago was your first
Yeah,
one?
it was the first, yeah. Before that, I made furniture. My background is fine arts, and the many times that I tried to go to school, I was, a fine arts major. I worked in a lot of different mediums. I liked sculpture a lot, but there was something missing. Then, out of necessity for a job, I started working in a furniture factory out in Holland, Michigan, and I just fell in love with wood. And I've been doing some kind of woodworking ever since. Had a small business making rustic furniture from twigs and things, from sticks and things like that. Did that for a while. Let's see, I worked in furniture factories, historic restoration, doing 18th and 19th century woodworking techniques. And then 30 years ago, I saw an ad in the paper to, looking for teachers to teach at the adult school in Morris County. So I said, sure, I'll teach. So I started teaching woodworking, and I've been teaching ever since. That's been 30 years.
Wow. So it sort of seems like this sort of instinctual draw to the banjo that you have sort of resonates with a lot of other, I guess, traditional aspects of woodworking, but maybe even just a call to a different, really different lifestyle. You said you discovered this music scene and these civil reenactments. So it sort of seems like all these things sort of it's like it's a huge calling that.
It's part of my path. I've been very drawn to over the years to folk life, especially American folk life, and the deeper I investigate it, the more truth I find there. One of the things I was doing in college, I went to this, I like to call them hippie colleges in the 70s. It was called Thomas Jefferson. It was out in Michigan. That's why I went to Michigan. What we were doing out there at the school was essentially working on what we called appropriate technologies, solar, wind turbines, alternative ways of home building, biodynamic farming, and how it all intersected with art. And so, the year that I was at that school, that's what I was kind of immersing myself in. And I just, I kept seeing that there was technologies from the past that were still very relevant and still worked. The other thing I discovered that around so many of the trades, there was actually like a culture. Back in the day, let's take something sort of close to home. New Jersey has canals. There was the Morris Canal, the Delaware Canal. And what I found out when I was working at a place called Waterloo Village as a woodwright, I found out that they had their own form of slang, poetry, songs, and there was all these technologies that were very job specific or trade specific, and that developed for that purpose. Like let's see, another example would be here in New Jersey, Barnegat Bay. I'm sure you've been down to the Jersey Shore, been to the bay. Did you know that there are like 7-8 different workboats that were designed just to meet the conditions on that bay? And that fascinated me. And what's also and I found very interesting is that, using the bay as an example, to be a bayman, to work on that water, there were so many things you had to know. You had to be able to read the water, read the weather, know how to repair your boats, know how to make your own nets, repair your nets, things like that. And there's songs and other such things about the bay. And I just found that fascinating. And the more I would investigate things, the more I would find that to be true. There's all these little microcultures. And I just find myself being drawn to that, which you could, I've sort of expanded that even from a political perspective, local. There's a political philosophy called bioregionalism. It's all about place, getting to know where you live, getting to know it in what plants grow here, what are the weather patterns, what's the prehistory here, what's geology all about, why are things the way they are. My wife and I live over on what's called Long Hill, and it borders the Great Swamp, which is sort of my sacred place. And what I found is that, as I started researching and learning about the area when I moved back to New Jersey in the late 80s, I discovered that I'd spent most of my life living on a glacial lake bed, Glacial Lake Passaic. And this ridge that we live on, it's a pile of glacial debris. It's where the Wisconsin glaciers stopped.
Okay.
It came up against where we are now, which is, the Watchungs, up the hill there.
Right.
That's the Watchung Mountains. It's Second Mountain, and then you go over this First Mountain. It came up against First Mountain and stopped. And as it retreated, it left this pile of debris, which is huge, in parallels to the mountain range. So I discovered very recently that I lived at the base of this pile of glacial debris over in Livingston. And I just found that fascinating. So I've been trying to get to know get to know the place, my territory,
Right.
and it's been a real delight. Really getting to know where I'm from.
Right. Well, I think that is so important to any practice is getting to know the landscape.
Absolutely.
By doing this, we get in touch with our roots. We get to know our basic nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
This thing that is shared by everybody. And when we do that, then that's when we can sort of really understand what is resonating in that valley, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so I guess my first question in terms of where these things intersect is what is what is a way we can sort of carve out that's I mean to me what it seemed like you were saying is that there's this importance for understanding where you come from, and that's also understanding ourselves.
Yeah.
Where does how can we start that process as artists in order to help our work come out a little bit more from that natural place?
Well, you have to start with yourself. We spend so much time living on the periphery, always living out there. We're always fighting causes out there, which which is basically a good thing. But I think it's really important to start inward.
Right.
Get to learn about yourself. Learn to be brutally honest with yourself, and then begin to work out. Move forward.
Right.
I know in my own life, what I find is that having this defined territory helps me stay grounded, helps me stay settled. And I know that within that territory, my watershed, my bioregion, call it what you will, there's work to be done. And there are people to engage with.
Right.
And so I just, you start with yourself, and then you slowly proceed outward.
Right.
And you just become very observant of what's around you. Like I said before, what are the plants? What are the flowers? When do they bloom?
Mm-hmm.
You can, it's interesting because, my wife and I were talking about how, in recent years, the role that climate change has had, having grown up around here, the weather we're having right now, by this time in November, it was cold.
Right.
And we might have had a flurry or two. And, like we're sort of seeing, noticing that October has become September.
Right. Yeah.
And that weather line that used to be down in Middlesex County is now moved up this way. So when we were getting snow, they might be getting rain,
right.
Or sleet. But that line's moved up here now. So, you begin to notice things like that.
Right.
Like when I was a kid, there weren't a whole lot of deer around here. Now they're everywhere.
Right.
I remember, oh God, when I was in my 20s, I heard about the state bear count. It was like 8.
Oh my gosh.
And this was years ago. Now they're in my backyard. Great. Welcome back.
Right.
This is your home too. Very recently, I found out there were bobcats over in the swamp.
Oh wow.
There's a family of coyotes that scare the living bejesus out of people now.
I believe it. Yeah. those things howl.
Oh, they do. They do. But I think it's wonderful. They're cutting back.
Ecosystem over there.
They're claiming what's theirs.
Yeah.
They were here first. Years ago, after I moved back, I read a story, and I think it was a story in the newspaper and there was a photograph of a black bear over near Summit, just kind of lounging in a tree, and it cracked me up. And I wrote a poem about it. It's called "What Black Bear Found." It goes something like, "Black bear, gone so long, you have returned hungry for acorns and grubs, but finding only radishes and snap beans in straight, even rows." So they're coming back.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's something you said that I find really interesting, and in terms of, mindset. You said, when you're observant of these things, you're watching these things, you're noticing how, things are changing. This isn't what you observed before.
Right.
And I think that we when we can apply that to ourselves too, right? There's another thing that you said to me in a prior conversation, that sobriety isn't just about being sober,
Right.
and that we can we can be sober, but we can still sort of be checked out. We can be sort of sitting
Yes.
sitting
Yeah.
back and just sort of letting this stuff happen, and not and maybe we're observing it, but the way that we're letting it pile up, that observation is it's not enough to actually apply and say, oh, this isn't the way it was, or things change, of course, but
Yeah, I guess we should preface this with part of my spiritual practice and of my path has been 12-step work.
right.
I'm a recovering alcoholic. I have been coming up on 26 years sober.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. And in part of that process, what I've discovered is, again, sobriety is more than just abstention.
right.
For me, it was the beginning. It was another starting point to continue on with my path. Now, this is not to say that everybody approaches a 12-step program differently,
Right.
and for some people, maybe just abstaining from substance abuse or other forms of addiction is the best they can do. And God bless them, all power to them. And if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. But for some of us, we want to keep, it opened a door, or in my case, reopened a door, and continue, so I can continue on in this journey,
Right.
this path that I'm on. But yes, that's what I mean when I say that it's more than just abstention
Right.
from a substance. It's about growing.
Right. Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah. And so for us to really grow, it's, I mean, certainly this isn't universal, but at least I found this the case for myself, for us to, keep growing and keep that, energy of sobriety, it really helps to have a craft or a
Oh, it
tool,
does. It does.
something to occupy ourselves with, and then to channel that energy through.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'd like to ask is how has your craft and how has your path, transmuted these, I mean, for lack of a better word, difficult and very human qualities to the path?
Well, I think when I think of practice, first off, I guess the way I experience practice in terms of a spiritual way is engagement. It's how I engage with anything,
Right.
and where I come from with it. As we've chatted before, I'm Christ-centered. My practice evolved or developed through Quaker practice.
Right.
But even before that, I was very, very fortunate when I was 24 to encounter a man who became my spiritual teacher out in Michigan. I met him in the damnedest place. He got the bench across from me at that furniture factory. And at the time, I was on the verge of becoming a Baha'i, which I thought, it's a very beautiful practice. but after hanging around him, it was very clear to me what my path was and where I needed to go. And so he introduced me to the contemplative aspect of Christendom, well, for lack of better words, Christian mysticism.
Right.
It's one of those sort of, I'm uncomfortable with the word, but I don't know what else to use.
Unfortunately, for experiences like that, there's it almost seems like there should be a limited vocabulary, but it's something that we're definitely not used to being introduced to in this part of the world.
Yeah. He introduced me to what I would call the inward way.
Mm-hmm.
In Quakerism, it's the Christ within, the light within, that it starts here. It's a heart experience.
Right.
And again, you start there and work out. And he and I spent about 9 months together. And then from there, I left Michigan because I knew it was time to go, and he knew it was time for me to go. And I headed out.
Mm.
It's kind of interesting about that. One of our last conversations, he said two things to me. He said, remember that everything you go through in life is not for you, but for somebody else. Because someone else is going to need your experience.
Right.
And I found that to be very true, especially in 12-step work. Mm. What we say in AA is we share our experience, strength, and hope.
Right.
The other thing he said to me, it was kind of like a question. We were just sitting around over coffee, and he just looked at me and said, "You really want to go through with this?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean? Do you know what I mean? You really want to be on this path?" Mm. I said, "Sure. Yeah, you bet I do. This is great. I want to be a mystic, Right. And he just said, "Okay, I believe you." Mm. What I didn't realize that when I committed to that within about a year or so after leaving Michigan, my life started to radically change, and not in a good way. Things like my drinking got out of control, all kinds of things happened. And I didn't quite understand why. But 26 years ago, I finally couldn't take it anymore and got sober. And it was after a period of what we call getting our brains back that I realized what he meant.
Right.
Are you willing to go through what you have to go through to be of service to other people?
Right.
And then it all made sense to me.
Right.
Would I rather have done it a softer, easier way? Oh yeah. Absolutely. But it went, I am stubborn, boneheaded, and I had to do it this way.
Right.
And I don't regret it. I truly don't.
That experiential line in these lineages and traditions
Yes.
are so important. I mean, and certainly, unfortunately, it gets to the point where people observe them too much and say, "Oh, this is like the one pathway, the one lineage," right? But what I see as it representing is a culmination of experience passed down. Mm-hmm. And like you're saying, you don't take up the practice for self-empowerment and personal gain or to even just make your life more manageable. You really, I mean, of course, that maybe having your life become a little bit more manageable is a side effect of being on a certain pathway, but it's to help someone who can't see that clearly. And it's such a, I mean, as I go through some maybe experiences that are like, oh, I really have some strong aversion to this. It'd be great if I didn't experience that, right? But it's not necessarily up to us. We don't have control over that. And the the positive that comes out of having this negative experience is being able to be there for someone else when maybe they're going through something similar, but way worse.
Yes.
But you can just be somewhat of an anchorage to say, hey, this is temporary. This is going to pass.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the things my teacher, stressed that we're obligated to do two things in life, and that is one, self-actualize, and to be of service.
Right.
That's why we're here. And especially at my age, I'm almost 70, I see how true that is. And I think to some people it might look like I've withdrawn from the world. And I guess to some degree I technically have. I don't get involved in much. I'm no longer politically engaged. I'm not storming in the streets like I used to. I've been there. I've been tear gassed. I've been thrown in jail. Blah blah blah. But at my age, I don't feel that that's where I need to be.
Right.
I feel my job, or my role right now, is to sort of be an elder of the tribe. My job is to tend the fire. And at the same time, always be of service.
Right.
Always be available,
Right.
always be present. I feel like my job now is to, make make banjos, create art, write poetry, canoe and fly fish, but be present when someone is in need of help,
Right.
or ask for assistance.
Right.
It's right for youth to be out on the streets. That's where your energy needs to be.
Right.
As someone my age, we need to center down.
Right.
We need to return to the hearth. We need to tend the fire, and we need to be available. I used to, sometimes I think, my job is to pat you guys up and kick you back into the fight.
Absolutely. No, I totally resonate with that. I mean, because like we were talking about before, experience and knowledge being passed down. That's what you're saying. You have that experience, right? So you're able to pass that down to people in our generation, and that seems like that's the natural cycle almost, right? That when you're young and youthful, you have all this, emotionally charged energy, and that makes you want to take more physical action.
Yeah, you have the fire. Your
Right.
fire burns very bright.
Right.
My job is to tend that fire. At least I think an elder of the tribe is to tend that fire.
Right. And that's where I see the next part in the cycle is that fire really eventually grows in all of us, right? As much as we can say, oh, I've got this, I can control it. It's fire by its own nature is uncontrollable.
Right.
Although it is, has a creative force to it, it's also got a very strong destructive force to it.
Yes, it does.
So that it seems like, what you're saying is that, you're understanding your role to tend the fire, to help us sort of be contained within ourselves and not be too destructive, but to also, take care of the places where you let that fire spread out in your youthfulness, right? It gets to a point where we all need to go back inward and pay a little bit more attention to that.
I'd agree. Yeah, it's right now in terms of my relationship to, say, Quakerism, I consider myself a solitary practitioner. I keep being what I call being, I'm always going back to the desert, especially at this age. There's questions that I have still. There are things that I need to learn.
Right.
And so, like I said, I go back to I call it the desert. It's that place internally,
Right.
where I have to withdraw.
Right.
And what's going on, like center down, turn inward and listen. Listen.
Right.
And when when something comes up, learn to discern, get clear on it, then make a move, so to speak.
Right.
Then take action.
That's such a. I mean, I think that's such an important, aspect to pay attention to have, and so that sort of leads into my next question, which would be, it's sort of recognized, in these contemplative traditions, these, for lack of a better word, mystic traditions that, I guess again, I'm getting trapped in the language here, but that desired experience would sort of slip into that space in between, and to sort of, be observant of yourself until you see the point in between the waves. And then, but from within that space, as an artist, there seems to be something that comes out of that.
Oh yeah.
And that is so important to get in touch with our own art and to really let it come out in a more genuine way.
I agree. I think the job of the artist is to reveal the mystery.
Wow.
I believe that's critical, and I've recently been doing a lot of reading about Paleolithic art, and I've been very interested or drawn to the work of indigenous people or first peoples, primitive art, but I don't mean primitive in a pejorative way,
Right. A more natural.
Non-classic, it's not classical.
Right. Right.
No one's been really schooled in it, and what I'm noticing and what I'm experiencing is there is what I see in this work, the cave paintings, African masks, is that there's no limit or the imagination is not constricted. Whereas, sadly, the role that traditional Christianity has had on the arts, especially early on, it's very restricted.
Right.
Then you had like the Romantic poets, who rebelled against all that. William Blake and Goethe, people like that. But it was still within that context of European Western tradition.
Right.
What I love about non-European, non-Western tradition art is how free it is.
Right.
Looking at art history, I think there were attempts, like after World War II, or even before, when we're getting into abstraction, abstract art, and, abstract expressionism and such. There was this attempt to break free, but it was still kind of limited. And I think in the past, I guess how I'd say this is that I believe that art has gone from being what I call the trinity of head, heart, and hands, to what I see as being a purely intellectual experience now.
Right.
I remember when I was in college, and it's one of the reasons I got so frustrated in college, there was all this talk of conceptualism.
Right.
And, I have a rule of thumb, the longer the explanation, the less valid the piece is.
Absolutely.
I'm not interested in the intellect. I'm not interested in seeing a person, someone acting out their angst on canvas, or in performance art or something like that.
Right.
It's too much in the head. It's way too much in the head. I want to experience art that came from the heart.
Absolutely. And it really is such a shame that what we're saying is an education in arts or music theory is really colonial European classical theory on
there's
this
a place
stuff.
for it, don't get me wrong.
Of course, yeah, and certainly a lot of this stuff is genuine, great, masterful pieces of art. And
Yes,
music,
it is. It's absolutely gorgeous.
It's it's unfortunately been used as a weapon to be turned against the
Mm-hmm.
more naturalistic and our earlier, more primal instincts
Mm-hmm.
as humans that were genuine, amazing, masterful pieces of art as
Oh,
well.
absolutely.
And
Oh, I
and, and,
agree.
and not even, I mean, and like you're saying, like it's primal's not a good, it's not used in a pejorative sense. It's usually just to
Mm-hmm.
refer to the time period. But the amount of, I mean, there's also a pretty strong level of intellect in that stuff as well, especially because a lot of these, traditional forms of music had
Oh, God,
polyrhythms
yes.
and just really
Yeah.
interesting song structures and
Mm-hmm.
stuff that, you know, would maybe considered be bending or breaking the rules of traditional music theory,
Mm-hmm.
but that are, really, really, high level,
Oh,
highbrow
yes.
pieces of stuff. It takes a lot of
Mm-hmm.
intelligence to appreciate that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It does, but it has heart. At least, excuse me,
right.
from my experience, it has heart.
Yes, absolutely.
I've heard uh, field recordings of musicians, playing instruments like a gourd banjo or an instrument like that just made, it just gave me the chills. It was just so beautiful.
Right.
I remember the first experience. One of the reasons I just went crazy over banjo when I was a teenager was I heard a recording by a musician. He was also a banjo builder, which really intrigued me, named Frank Prophet. He was from Reese, North Carolina. And I'd seen pictures of him, and he was playing one of his banjos. And I thought, I should check that out. So I found a vinyl recording from back then, and I played this. And the first tune I heard was a spiritual called Long Time Traveling. And his voice and his playing just devastated me. I was like, what is this?
Right.
And I kept playing it over and over again. I wore that album out. It's not, I still have it, but it's not playable. But it brought up a question that I've yet to fully answer. Is that I wanted to know where this music came from.
Right.
And I didn't mean geographically.
Right. Yeah.
I wanted to know where this stuff came from.
Right. Yeah.
And I've been searching ever since.
Absolutely.
It's very powerful music. It's what I love about traditional musics from all over the world. I focus primarily on American music because that's where I'm from.
Right.
But it's just, I mean, it's just incredible. The music is just unbelievable.
What was that guy's name again?
Frank Prophet.
Frank Prophet. Okay. You said he also makes.
He made banjos.
He made banjos.
Yeah, he died in '63.
Wow.
Yeah, he made banjos. He was also a carpenter, herbalist.
Wow.
He walked. I was reading the liner notes on one of his albums once, and the person who was writing the notes saying how they just walked through the North Carolina woods, and he'd pick something up and say, you can use this for, whatever,
Right.
and this one over here, you can use. And what was so beautiful that he was so connected to place. It was more than nowadays. It's like, you learn an instrument, you go to the School of Rock,
Right.
but you don't, I mean, as far as I know, you don't, take the music further back,
Right. It's at least it's certainly a rare thing.
Yeah.
I really have the privilege to be friends with someone who is a music teacher and actually did work for the School of Rock. But he was very disillusioned with the way they ran things and the way that they explain music theory and him seeing the structure of that being really more of a tool of divisiveness. He couldn't be a part of that anymore. So he teaches on his own. It seems like that's as a, at least for some of us, we really do need to be more solitary in order to be truer to our ideals and values. And just before I go on to that, I wanted to just backtrack a little bit and how that really, when we're true to our ideals and values, that there seems we're able to blend some stuff together. We're able to take, the different parts of our lives and transmute into our own path. Like you were saying, like, finding, just being able to be in your own element, in your own, part of the world or your nature, and just seeing all the different usefulness and being able to just use that to chart forward. That seems like really something we should be striving for.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said before, practice is about engaging.
Right.
Engaging your life with what's around you. And that's kind of what I try to do to the best of my abilities. Like I say, part of my practice is paddling canoes and fly fishing and interacting with people and spending time in my studio shop, reading, rummaging around old bookstore. I mean, it's the engagement and at the same time trying to be present and trying to practice the presence of the divine. Trying to be there trying to be with that all the time. And that's a struggle.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh God, there's this wonderful book, and it was a work of fiction. I don't read a lot of fiction. I wish I could remember the name of the book, but the opening paragraph of this book was a line. It was this guy. It was going to be his life story, and he was an old man talking about it. And something he said was, when he leaves this world and crosses over to the other side, he will be as ragged and as worn out as the day he left. And I thought a lot about that because it really struck me. And I thought that it's true that if you do the work you're supposed to do here, if you wrestle with your demons, if you confront yourself, radically, self-confrontation, you're going to get beat up, right?
And I like to think that when you cross over to the other side and you meet the God of your understanding or your experience, you're going to look at your hands and say, "Yep, you did the work. Come on in."
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got work to do here. And it's not all outside of us.
Right.
A lot of internal work. And I really truly believe that if we started there, if we start internally and slowly work out, all those changes we want in the world will happen.
Right. There's there's a saying in the martial arts, especially specifically the Chinese martial arts, that there's two different types of cultivation of the Tao. I should really say this is more specific to Taoist practice, but this is integrated into a lot of traditional Chinese martial arts, that there's external alchemy and internal alchemy. And so that, that the external alchemy is using your physical body, really being, having a lot of, fiery energy, and then, taking that chaos and sort of calming it down and bringing it inside to, for self-realization. And then the inverse of that is internal alchemy, which is focusing on the internal. That usually is a much more, at least on appearance side, peaceful practice. And I think that, what you're saying has so much truth because, it seems like it's a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but more convenient to focus on the externals first and think, I'll focus on this and then I'll be able to get my emotions in line. We really think it's so much easier to just be, I'll focus on the external, and then that'll just turn internal. Like it's just going to work out that way. And I think, especially in our culture, it's really kind of scary to be like, all right, what, I'm going to start with the emotions. And I think that it turns so many people away from a contemplative practice because I got to deal with that shit right now, right away, and it's scary, it's frightening, like you said.
It is.
But when you're at the mean, I'm certainly far from the end of whatever, but when it seems like when you finally get to that point of final self-reflection, will you be happier with yourself knowing that you really put in that work, or will you be a little bit like, oh, maybe I didn't do as much as I could have, and it seems like that internal path is really a great way to sort of at least start that.
Oh yeah, yeah, I agree. I have developed a little philosophy that I really can't make a difference in the world more than beyond, say, like a 50-foot radius around me at any given time.
Mm.
So if I focus on that wherever I am,
Right.
and if the opportunity to be of service, to be present for someone or something, within that my daily 50-foot radius, that's probably where I can do the best work. I always wonder about whether the world is really mine to change. Who do I think I am? There's a quote from Barry Lopez, who I really like. He's a wonderful writer. Hold on a second. Let me see.
Sure.
I brought it with me because I like it.
Great.
This is a little book I put together called my Book of Hours, and it's just quotes that I've gathered over the years.
Book of Hours?
Hours,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, it was a medieval tradition,
Okay.
a monastic tradition. They'd read from the Book of Hours.
Very cool.
This is from Barry Lopez. It says, we cannot, of course, change the world because we do not have the authority over its parts. We can serve the world, though. That is everyone's calling, to lead the life that helps. And I agree with that completely.
Right.
And it's always been a challenge for me. Part of me says, oh, I need to be out there demonstrating and stuff. But a big part of me says, no.
Right.
You need to do the work around you, help the people around you first.
Right.
And if everybody did that, we'd all get taken care of, ideally.
Absolutely. I really, Barry Lopez?
Barry Lopez.
I really like that quote because it, to me that purely illustrates the difference between action and service. When like you say, who is it to us to make the world in our image, right?
Right.
The world is what it is.
Exactly.
And certainly maybe our image is more compassionate, more harmonious to a certain extent, but that's our projection. That's what we think it needs to be. That's what we think how these people need to act.
Mm-hmm.
And although maybe it's morally aligned correctly, but it doesn't do the job to go out there and be like, oh, you need to change.
Yeah.
It doesn't. But when we can learn to serve those people who maybe we think need a change of mindset or something,
Mm-hmm.
and see what their ailments are, see what their human struggles are.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like how we develop that harmony is not how do I change this person? How do I serve? How do I serve this person?
Right. Yeah. It's the left-right paradigm.
Right.
That very divisive.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of finger pointing.
Right.
And I don't think that gets much of anything done anymore.
No, it doesn't.
A lot of finger pointing, a lot of blaming. You owe me.
Mm.
I understand what's behind that, but coming from the left, I just feel that, because I'm from the left, I get to criticize the left.
Mm. Definitely.
What I see is that, or what I don't see is, I don't see, what's the word I'm looking for? Not enabling, but the opposite of enabling. Promoting, or creating situations that will get people out of the situation they're in.
Right.
I always thought, well, if you don't like the economic system, why not just create a new one? Get together and start a credit union.
Right.
You don't have to deal with banks anymore. I've been a member of credit union for years. I love them. I think the most radically wonderful thing going on right now is the revival of small agriculture.
Right. Absolutely.
Urban farms are beautiful.
That needs to be a necessity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the most radical thing going on.
This is what really gets me about our political alignment too, is that there is so much observation there, and that's good, but it's all there doesn't seem to be many active solutions being brought up
Right.
to the immediate crises that our planet is facing. And so certainly, urban farming is something that would hugely, benefit,
Oh, absolutely,
immediately
yes.
our society.
Yeah,
So
Americans
it's-
are addicted to outrage,
yeah,
in my opinion.
right,
And it's almost a knee-jerk response.
right. I mean, to me, it goes back to a little bit to what we were talking about, the true meaning of sobriety. Where it's like, it's much easier to sit back and let this system, be destructive and say, oh, what's going on here? This is an outrage. How can we? But we're sitting back and watching it too. That we don't, as a whole, we haven't still fully come together and say, okay, we need to be a little bit more active about this. We need to be a little bit more mindful about what we're doing.
Yeah, I think it was Joseph Campbell who said once that you really can't change a system,
Right.
but you can learn to be in it, and but function differently.
Right.
We're here in New Jersey. My God, it's what the poverty density of Asian countries.
Right.
And so we're surrounded by all this energy and all these people, but you still you don't have to be sucked up by it.
Right.
You can still act in a positive way, like urban farming.
Absolutely.
Cooperatives. There are so many things you can do. It takes work, but it can be done. So like I say, the idea of always trying to change the system. You change a system, you install another system. It's the old dialectic. It's going to turn on itself. We are always trying to change the system. Let's change ourselves.
Right.
Let's start there.
That to me seems like it's such a relief to hear, right? That we actually don't need to be sucked into it.
Right. You don't have to.
And it's not something that's automatically going to happen just
Right.
by being in proximity to it. That we
Yes.
have the power to withdraw at any moment, and that really it reminds me of when certain spiritual practices were being revitalized in India in the late 19th, early 20th century, specifically Kriya Yoga. There was these guys were living in these huge cities. But still developing these ashrams and allowing people to have the retreatants of a shramana, of an extreme ascetic practitioner of spirituality within the chaos of a busy city.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
His name Lahiri Mahayasa was he had the famous nickname I'm blanking on it, like the lay yogi, or basically he was renowned as being able to be a renunciate in the middle of a chaotic city.
Yeah.
And how that's possible. That's what he was trying to show, is it's possible to have this extreme spiritual devotion in the middle of a very materialistic society.
Yeah, you can have the same experience here. Say like on Labyrinth, when they do the Labyrinth here on Wednesday, or it used to be Wednesday night.
Yeah.
There's the hustle and bustle outside, and then you walk in, and then you walk into this space, and all of a sudden everything changes. There's a sense of solitude. There's a sense of the divine.
Right.
You can get centered here. Yet still all around you, the cars are going, people are trying to get to whatever bar they're going to or whatever. You know, they're coming home from work or they're heading out to second shift, whatever they're doing. There's all that hustle bustle, but you come in here and there's a moment of calm.
Right.
There's a moment of quiet, and there's a deep silence.
Right.
And here you are in the middle of an urban area. So it's possible.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I think and I think a lot of people actually practice that. You know, I think, you know, we're, especially when we're, you know, living in such a densely populated area and we feel that chaotic energy surrounding us a lot of time. I think, and especially as, you know, yoga and words like mindfulness become a little bit more, you know, popular and used in everyday vocabulary, you know, I think people sort of have that instinctive urge to get to that quiet place. I think what people sort of struggle with is learning how to carry that with them. And I think that's you know, stuff we all struggle with. You know, it's you know, we can reach that point of stillness. We can have maybe an experience of samatha or samadhi, but you know, we can also, just like we can pull ourselves out of the chaos, we can also unfortunately pull us out of that stillness and quiet. So I guess, you know, as someone who's been on the path for so long, what's a way that we can be a little bit easier on ourselves when that stuff happens, to maybe not, you know, think, oh, I've lost my way.
I laugh because I fall into that place pretty regularly.
Yeah.
You know, God damn it. You know, oh, how did I end up here? Blah, blah, blah. This isn't where I want to be. Oh boy. I guess the first step would just be accepting this is where you are at the moment. It's not easy. Don't get me wrong. I'm no master at this. But it's just acceptance, you know. Okay, here I am. My life's in turmoil.
Right.
So what do I do? Well, I guess I'll feel it for a while.
Right.
You know, and I'll go through all my buttons will be pushed, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll start putting it back together and taking a look at what really is going on and where I'm really at. And like I say, that can be very difficult. You know, I'm not very good at it, but I have a way of finding my way home. You know, yeah, just start with acceptance.
Right.
You know, here you are. You know, don't deny the feelings.
Right.
Try not to act out violently. And just try to remember where you are.
Right.
You know, and what's really going on, because your emotions will pop up. They always do. You know, we all have a history. You know, we all have, you know, past experiences that haunt us.
Right.
And occasionally dominate, you know, our rational thinking. But it'll eventually clear up and you can start thinking straight again and get back on your path.
Right.
You know. I hope that answers it.
No, it does. No, I mean, I mean, the phrase that I've heard is the grandfather or grandparent mindset. It's, you know, our parents, you know, are supposed to be, you know, strict with us, have a lot of guidelines, but you know, and so when our grandparents take care of us, you know, they still have that in mind. You know, they still know that we should have boundaries, but maybe, you know, when we, you know, have an accident, you know, accidentally break something, you know, do something we're not supposed to, our grandparents will, you know, gently remind us a little bit more that that's not what we should be doing. And so, at least that's the phrase I've heard, and that sort of sounds like that, you know, which is, you know, just, this happens, right? This is, you know, we're constantly in flux, we're constantly changing. So there's no reason to think that you're going to be calm and centered for the rest of your existence.
I've been very, very fortunate. I'm the dad of two stepsons, and they came along when I was 50. And as we entered each other's lives, I noticed that because I didn't have that biological bond, which is really strong and really powerful, and, you know, like you're talking about parents,
Right.
you know, that's very strong.
Right.
but I don't have the biological bond. So I think it gave me a little bit of objectivity to where I could interact with them a little bit differently.
Right.
You know, and I suspect if, you know, there was that biological bond, I'd be doing what every parent does, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
The way my parents were with me, and you know, your parents, as progressive as they are, still, you know, I mean, it's just, you know, you have those interactions. It's,
Right.
You
Of
know,
course.
so I think I understand what you mean by that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm really blessed. I mean, having two sons in my life, and these guys are just awesome.
Yeah.
You know, I really love them a lot. You know.
It's great to, you know, when we have connections like that. They really, I mean, they show us, and especially when it's, you know, when you can have that connection without the biological connection that allows that same, you know, warmth and spiritual connection to be there naturally.
Yeah.
You know, but when you find someone like that outside of your genes, that's something very special and beautiful too. And it shows us that this is, you know, these are, you know, connections, you know, between two different, you know, node points that really everyone has, you know. And once you can see that connection between two people, you can, oh wow, that really can be drawn between everyone.
And it's one of those things, going back to, you know, everything that we go through is for somebody else.
Right.
You know, I believe that I was prepared, you know, in you know, by my, you know, the life I lived, to be available for them.
Right.
You know, to have what they needed, and I'm very grateful. You know, I'd walk through fire for them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, this has been, you know, amazingly deep conversation. You know, I've always viewed you as, you know, somewhat of a mentor of mine.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you.
And you know, really just being able, you know, all those years ago, it was probably like 9 years ago at this point.
About that, yeah.
When I first met you. There's things that I still draw back to in those first moments when we met, just in terms of art and just, you know, knowing what it is to have a reverence for the natural aspect of our planet. And so you opened with a nice lick for us. Is there anything you'd like to close with? Maybe a poem or
I'd like to read a poem or two, if you don't mind.
That'd be great.
Let me find one that I really like.
Any more of that good banjo is always good to hear.
Okay, I'll see what I can do for you. Oh my, oh my. There's two I'd like to read.
Sure.
One is a recent one. It was a memory from when I was living out on a farm in Michigan. It's called Not Home. It was not home, but familiar enough. I was from a few places by then. The farm fields, the windbreak rows, the tired brown of the autumnal landscape. Patches of red moved slowly across the late-day horizon, hunters heading home after the hunt, their dogs leading the way. I took it all in. Then there, on that furthest edge of the fenced-in field, I felt a longing too old, too distant to know or hold, like a voice too faint to answer, calling me back to a place, a home I had yet to remember. This one you might remember. I wrote it for your mother 5 years ago.
Okay.
Your mother was heading out on her first sabbatical. It's a travel poem. It's in that tradition.
Okay.
It's called Suddenly Sky for Anne Roloski. Step a distance from the trees. Suddenly, the sky is so vast you almost drowned. Then as quickly, the ground returns, holding you firm. Your breath returns. Your eyes adjust slowly. You are surrounded by horizons. Walking slowly, your skin darkens. Your hair becomes the color of deserts. Water becomes your desire, but not for thirst. This is not madness. You are simply naked in the place of longing and sustenance. You embrace horizons.
Wow. That second one really actually speaks to me a lot. I was with my mother on that for sabbatical for a little bit.
Here, have a copy.
That'd be great.
Sorry, I only brought one.
It's okay.
And,
We'll share.
but that was one of the really first experiences that I had. I mean, I've always known my mom's been this, deeply spiritual, revered woman, really knows her stuff in terms of, the texts and everything. But that was sort of the first moment I had like a sort of realization of the impact of what she does and the kind of community leader she was. And it was just a very deeply humbling, trip and experience to have that with her. So thank you for sharing.
You're
this
very
so
welcome.
much.
You're very welcome. You want me to play one more tune? Or?
That'd be great. Why don't you
Take us out with that.
yeah, take us out with a nice lick.
Okay, let me see what tune I should play.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Derek. That
It's been a pleasure.
That was
It really
awesome.
has. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.